Tom Badley, welcome to the Bitcoin Muse.
Thanks for having me.
I've watched a few of your podcast episodes prior, and sometimes I feel like you don't get to go in as deep as you might want to on some of the more esoteric or philosophical ideas. I hope today we can do that just because I'm not as interested in NFTs so much as I am in the deeper artistic and creative challenges that, say, banknotes and creating art present you. Because you're a banknote artist, but you're a fine artist as well.
Depends who I'm talking to. So one day I might wear the hat of an artist. The next day it's a designer. Then it's a crypto artist. Then it's a banknote designer. The basic premise that I have that a lot of artists don't have is that I believe anything I make should perform in the real world. And that is a very designer way of thinking. Most artists don't hold themselves to account like that. Art is something that's made speculatively most of the time, and it doesn't need to perform, it just is. It's not a kind of tool in the world. But I have this sort of designer approach to justifying everything I do in art. And I should really make more artists' art, art that looks like art and isn't justified in the same way as design.
Yeah, that's sometimes I wonder, as a fellow artist, if we don't sometimes hide in that moniker, that it allows us to not define ourselves, that this whole free space that many people are afraid because they're not creative to go into or to use.
Yeah, the artist is an artist is like a catch-all. It's a kind of, I call it a get out of jail free card. It's not a crime, it's art, it's sort of, or it's not trash, it's art. So it's this kind of, it has this reputation of being, the artist is excused for making rubbish, a lot of times.
That brings up a very interesting idea that we share a kind of lament that modern art suffers from meaning and even aesthetic rigor.
Definitely. That's where it comes from, wanting to distance myself from art. I'm very careful to use the term artist to describe myself, because all sorts of derogatory things come up. And but at the same time, the artist is like this prankster and this king of culture. Art is always considered at the very top. Oh, it's art, so it doesn't have to bow to the same utility as anything else.
And and also I think that art has served it's sort of transformed from being ornamental and beautiful and almost divinely inspired to a way of protesting and leading a revolution. And I think Bitcoin and the artists that are being inspired by Bitcoin are weaving both of those. They're the tip of the spear for a Bitcoin revolution, but they're deeply concerned with aesthetics and meaningful art. And you seem to be really in a crossroads of that, or in the crossfire of that. Would you agree? Do you see that kind of melding of the two?
So that's something that I talk about in my book, and this is something that I've observed about crypto art, which is very weird and specific. Is in the midst of postmodernity, you've got crypto art, which seems to be very respectful towards meaning and symbolism, and that comes from, I believe, the fact that Bitcoin is a new thing. It's a new currency, and we want to apply value to that new thing. And the act of wanting to apply value to something, it pushes us to find relevant and powerful and resonant symbols. That goes contrary to how art has gone in the last 100 years, which is to downplay symbolism, which is to kind of actively disrespect symbolism and meaning. So isn't it weird when it comes down to money, when it comes down to what we want to find valuable in the world, there is an impulse to look for meaning and resonance. Isn't that weird? So what Bitcoin and cryptocurrency do in the art space, and no one said this, I seem to be the only guy who's saying this, it pushes people to find meaning and to make art with meaning. And that's a very, very notable development in the history of art, because it hasn't gone that way for the last few decades. So it is a new development, and it's being motivated by new forms of money. Very interesting to me, and I'm still formulating my ideas there, but
yeah, and it's a difficult thing to do given that it's a hugely dynamic space. Now, I'm a avowed Bitcoin maximalist. I see all the other chains as temporary blips on a larger landscape. I appreciate that you would be exploring and expressing yourself artistically on those things, but I feel like there's a huge amount of naivete being co-opted and taken advantage of by these other chains, to just sort of fill their block space with 8-bit nonsense. Now, we can debate that. Pixel art, yeah. You're not making that. You're making, and we should say that you've made some pretty interesting and even high-profile Bitcoin art. The Bukele dollar for Bitcoin Magazine and things like that. I'm sort of at a loss in a difficult way to frame this. You seem to be chain agnostic, and yet your words and your understanding seem like they're very firmly planted in the Bitcoin space.
I mean,
are you just not taking sides? Are you being a diplomat?
Most crypto tokens are nothing more than marketing attempts to try and steal money from people. But the handful that are legitimate have something, they have their own story and their own utility. So Bitcoin has something very specific behind it, very specific lore, a very specific utility. Ethereum is like, the two are chalk and cheese. You just can't compare them. But they have their own resonant meaning, and I like to play with that. This comes back to like being, having that designer mindset. If I'm working in Ethereum space, that I'm gonna make something that is for Ethereum. If I'm working in the Bitcoin space, then I'm gonna want to respect what Bitcoin is. So there's a couple of others I'm really interested in working with. I think Tezos has a future for art. I think Ripple is super interesting as a currency, as a story as well, because there's some weird old money funding of Ripple, and the family behind Ripple actually go back to the Medici family, and I find that absolutely fascinating. Here is this new form of money, and yet this sort of ancient bloodline is somehow involved, and I want to work with that. I want to express that in some way. So there's work to be done in these other coins, but Bitcoin's number one in my world. I would caution anyone, playing outside of the coins that I've mentioned. I would really heavily caution anyone playing for too long in the other spaces.
I'd be remiss then if so I appreciate that artistic curiosity, and obviously there's some tech savviness attached. I just worry that all your efforts would be for naught on a long enough time scale. Right?
Oh yeah.
that everything goes to zero. So you're sort of enjoying it, and I would hope that your prowess, your chops as an artist don't legitimize these chains unduly, whereas you're looking at it as a kind of artistic playground, and then it legitimizes it for some kid to lose, his $1,000 life savings.
Well, you can't be in cryptocurrency without losing money. That's part of the joys of cryptocurrency. But seriously, I think that in my world, Bitcoin is number one. But where there is a place to express a story, to tell a story, I will go. So I am agnostic a little bit. But this is also why I make physical art, and where I think I have a really strong differentiator when it comes to making physical art, because I, for want of a better expression, I print money, which is a pretty insane differentiator. It's a pretty insane point of difference. You mentioned the Bukele bills. They were physical. They weren't NFTs. They were physical bills that people actually received. And so you've got something there that will outlive Bitcoin, potentially. Will outlive any kind of ethereal cryptocurrency. So the physical side of making is very, very important to me. It's very important to respect the fact that I have this printmaking knowledge that not many people have. I'm working with materials not many people are working with. I'm producing print on a level that is really outside of the history of art. And that sounds ridiculous, but it's kind of true to have all these different print processes going on the same substrate is kind of unheard of, I think, in our history.
Yeah. I've been doing this now for a couple months as a podcast, and I've been poking around trying to find representations or the role money has played as a muse, and it is few and far between. There's religious, allegories of the Jesus tossing the money changers out of the temple, and people might paint that, but you're actually turning your money art. You're in a very unique space, so I would concur that.
I'm the only guy who's really making not only the aesthetics but the materials of money the medium. So there's a lot of artists who use banknotes as a material. You have people like Mark Wagner and others who cut dollar bills up and make collages with them. There are lots of artists who might draw on bills. There was Andy Warhol who screen printed dollar bills. But I'm the only guy who's really using the same techniques as money printing as art.
And we should say that you have been hired by nation states to make official government currency.
So to an extent, you can't really do this unless you've got proprietary knowledge. That's why I think it's kind of dangerous, because what I'm doing is sort of pulling apart the banknote and displaying it for all to see. So there's this line that I'm conscious to tread. How many state secrets am I divulging? How much proprietary knowledge am I putting out there? But at the end of the day, it is kind of unique. And
I love it.
That's why I had to write a book, because being an artist who uses money as the medium gives me unique insights into money and art. So that's inspired a book.
I love it. And I noticed in the book you have a term called the aesthetics of trust.
Right.
And I wondered if you could just elaborate on that a little bit. I think I know where you're going to go, but I'd love to hear it from you.
Okay, well, in that chapter, I break down the banknote and I say, why do we trust these little pieces of paper? And it turns out that the banknote is really this place where trust has been visually perfected, because the utility of a banknote, its only purpose is to be trusted, nothing else. If you cannot trust a banknote, if you cannot trust physical money, then the financial system fails. So you have something where artistry has been pushed in the direction of this needs to be trusted somehow. And so the aesthetic development of paper money has been pushed by that, has been motivated by that, and that's created a really specific aesthetic language, aesthetic environment. And in that chapter, I pull out all the elements of that and break it down so everyone can so it's all laid out basically. And it is very specific. It's very specific. It's apart from any other kind of graphic design. Most graphic design exists on one plane, one visual plane, and the aesthetics of banknotes are layered, not just in terms of like physical layers, but there are also a kind of conceptual layering that is almost fractal in nature with banknotes. You've got the same motifs repeated in various magnifications, and that brings it back to the Baroque. The Baroque is a place where it's you've got this aesthetic language which is designed to persuade, and so there's all these different details that repeat in different levels of magnification.
I like it, and I can pull some of those things apart, if you don't mind, where as a Bitcoiner, we see these physical notes and we see modern fiat is backed by literally nothing. So there's a kind of that the nation states are duping us into believing.
And I acknowledge that in the book. I say, look, the banknote for Bitcoin people or crypto people is like this. The portrait is almost the slave master, on banknotes, and I acknowledge that that there is something absurd about using banknote aesthetics in crypto art, but there's also something irresistible about it. So, that's why I'm here.
Yeah, and that those contradictions are fodder for an artist in any space, right? It's those conflicts. Then the Baroque, which we would celebrate for its kind of a ultimate expression of painterliness or sculptures. I mean, the world was alight with energy under the Baroque, and certainly the art history, or the art that survives, is undeniably beautiful almost to everyone who sees it. There was, of course, a message of belief, right? And much of the material is sitting in the Vatican, or it had a connection to a belief system that now being co-opted by nation states on dollar bills and on their fiat currency. Yeah, in God we trust. I had someone the other day ask me, we were having a vibrant discussion about the fallacies of fiat, and he says, well, you know what it's backed by? The full faith and credit of the U.S. government. And he said it straight-faced. I thought, maybe he's just being persuaded by the images on the bills themselves. Right.
Well, that's the power of money. And we can't imagine a world without money. And so it is a very persuasive thing. The thing that I take from it is that, how do I reconcile this sort of using the aesthetics of something that so many people resent, so many people, begrudgingly accept, perhaps. Whether it's banknotes or the Baroque, you have a ideology, a dogma, a religion, a system of control. Regardless, it brings out the best in human artistry. Because, like the Baroque, not everyone appreciates Christianity or likes the idea of God, yet it's undeniable. Humans built this. And if nothing else, these cathedrals and monuments are monuments to human brilliance. And that's what I find in the banknote, because I've sat next to people who engrave those portraits. I've worked with people who perfect those machines that print the bills, and the whole process is amazing to me. The whole process is like a Baroque cathedral. So there is this sort of the nature of debt is parasitic, yet both are mirrors of our brilliance, you know. So that's what I kind of take from it.
I mean, you get into that, I think, in your book. You mention that on the eve of fractional reserve banking and all that Bitcoiners might lament today and be frustrated by today and see through today, was also a time when religion was fading. So there was the same way. So as religion fades, fractional reserve banking co-ops that space left in the void. And now here we are again, centuries of fractional reserve banking. Faith or let's say faith loses it takes another step back, and the state fills the void. So we've got a sort of double whammy of fractional reserve banking and the state filling voids in our psyche. And then along comes Bitcoin. Along comes this fresh take on the best money that has no ability to capture symbols. It doesn't have, there's no physicality to it. Is that going to be the secret way back? I don't know. Or just to erase that space and to refill it with something more meaningful. Is that question making any sense? The idea being that we've been unmoored for centuries now, and money and the state have filled that space. Fractional reserve banking and the state have filled that emptiness. And maybe with Bitcoin, we can take back ground and bring meaning back into our lives. Now, so it's not an artistic question, but it could be.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting. In the book, I talk about how, the historical appearance of Bitcoin, it represents a need for the human being to decentralize. The key idea that I have in the back of my head, writing this book, and something I'll go in much more detail in the sequel, is the idea that we are evolving. We're always evolving, but this process of human evolution is really accelerating. And with that accelerated evolution comes a desire not to believe, not to trust, but to know. It's kind of like the next level. And so faith in the nation, faith in the state, faith in banks, blind faith, we begin to see that as not good enough. We want to know. The human race wants to know. There is this building desire to want to know all things, to intuit things. And Bitcoin, a kind of decentralized shift in the monetary system, it's like it's the precursor of something much bigger, which is decentralized governance. The way this goes is that you start off thousands of years ago with a church. And the cool thing about religion, organized religion, is it gives people very clear rules on what to do with their lives and how to live. And at the time, we needed that. And that kind of created a society. As that grew, you had the king or the queen, the monarchy, became like a stand-in for God. We call that the divine right to rule. As human beings progress and they want more space to explore themselves, that idea of the divine right to rule comes into question. And what takes over after monarchy is the state. which is what we've had, because the state feeds and clothes people in a way that makes them that ensures a level of comfort that wasn't existing before. After the state comes the role of business, and this is what we have right now. We're in this space where actually governments are pretty irrelevant in people's lives, and it's actually pan-national organizations like the IMF, the WHO, the Bank of International Settlements. These are the guys that are actually dictating policy. So we can say that governments have stepped aside and now we are run by business. It's business that is playing the role in our lives. Now, because the human being wants to expand and explore and know, that progression is unstoppable. It cannot be stopped by any totalitarian regime. It cannot. It just cannot. Because in an effort to keep up with decentralization, big business begins to cannibalize itself because it has to perform on a more kind of granular level. And what eventually happens is that both the big business gets broken down into smaller and smaller concerns. Big business decentralizes into small business, and we have a return to the family state. Before organized religion, we had city-states. We had locales that were laws unto themselves. And we are going to sort of gradually return to that. And eventually we get let loose into the wild. We return to the lap of nature, where the only organizational structure is the family. I'm talking in this is a 400 or 500 year process. 400, 500 year process.
Do you think it'll really be that long? I mean, given the accelerated pace of technology?
Yes, because there are a few bumps in the road and things have to kind of, the human race has to calm down a little bit. We are where we are now is that this is all my personal belief, but where we are now is just on the cusp of the first real bout of chaos, which breaks down it's like big business's last gasp. It's the last gasp of the IMF. It's the last gasp of the World Health Organization. It's the last gasp of the nation as a concept. But that last gasp could last, 3 decades, 4 decades. So this is a long process. This is a long game. Bitcoin, to go back to your question, is just the way history works is that things come along and they just permeate themselves throughout culture. They offer like a little thought experiment. And that's what Bitcoin is. It's like this little spark in culture that's designed to spark and inspire conversations like this. People are having similar conversations all around the world. What could governance look like? What could the state look like? When everything is decentralized and broken down to its natural state, what does that look like? So things come along like Bitcoin that sort of permeate culture, and it builds momentum over decades.
Oh, I love it. I think, and it was really kind of beautiful to look on those timescales, because I think the average Bitcoiner, and I would agree with you, that we are in that the nation state and all the associated trappings of IMFs and BISs are their extinction burst is upon us. They're doing their damnedest and overreaching. And funny that, and at the very beginning, the idea of Bitcoin, don't trust, verify, that speaks to that earlier notion of.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Everyone wants stuff now. Everyone wants stuff to happen now, like in the next 10 years, in the next 1 year, in the next month. But that's just not how history works, Things are slow moving.
Right.
And to go from a society of total centralization, which is what we have now, we have a little scrap of empowerment when it comes to Bitcoin. We have a little thing to hold on to, which is decentralized. But for the most part, we are in a thoroughly centralized world. to move that from there to a completely decentralized world, it involves such a core change in every single man, woman, and child. Because to become decentralized requires an impeccable level of self-responsibility and self-reliance that we just don't know what that feels like. So it's like a aircraft carrier that's sort of this slow aircraft carrier that's like has to make a 180-degree turn. It's a very slow thing, and the events to transpire in the world are all there to trigger more self-reliance, and it can be scary at times, it can be frightening, it can be inspiring, and everything in between. But it is, I want to assure everybody, it does resolve itself eventually. It just has to get pretty messy.
So putting you on the spot a little bit, if we've posited this kind of beautiful renaissance or something new, right, where the city-state reemerges and the family takes precedence again, and we have a digital future of digital money exists. Obviously, I'd argue Bitcoin. All the while, your particular aesthetic and you're steeped in the symbols and techniques of the nation state's tool for slavery, which was fiat money.
Mm-hmm.
How are you living with that burden?
Well, it comes back to what I said before, that broken down, when the banknote is broken down and it's taken out of its banknote context, then it's, for me, it communicates trust. And just like the Baroque, you have something behind it which is very specific, a Christian version of God. You might not buy into that, but you can buy into the idea that the Baroque basilica is beautiful. And it's kind of the same with banknotes. Banknotes have become an art form for me, a medium. And I suppose there is something, there is a practical thing. I don't want to say practical, but there is something that is utilitarian about it, because cryptocurrency, its failing is that we call it trustless. Yet the human works on trust. The way we approach each other in the world, brands, however we interact with the world, we have to trust something in order to use it. We're not machines that just require 0 and 1 input. We need to constantly be pinging our environment to see what we can trust and what we can't. And so, because the banknote is a place that has perfected the aesthetics of trust, there is a role for banknote design in a Bitcoin or cryptocurrency space. It is trustless, of course, but Bitcoin must be trusted by us for us to be able to use it. So the way I approach working with Bitcoin and using banknote aesthetics is that I'm honoring, this is my way of honoring cryptocurrency, of honoring Bitcoin, by taking something which is the most perfected visuals of trust and applying it in the cryptocurrency space. Because then you have something that can perform in the real world. It can delight and it can be something seductive. Bitcoin, when it's reduced to its basic components, it's just code. It's just zeros and ones. Humans need aesthetics. We need something beautiful. We need something impressive to be seduced by, to find in a way that reflects our own, the things that we aspire to.
Well, obviously, as a visual artist, I like the idea that there would be a component of just visual art to inspire trust.
I have this mantra where I say, crypto was waiting a decade for the crypto artist. And before crypto art really came into its own, Bitcoin had very little visual language, very little visual lexicon. And it's no coincidence that the Bitcoin crosses the threshold into mainstream consciousness at the very same time that crypto art comes to prominence. There isn't, that's not a coincidence. That's not an accident. That is because we need something visual to hang on bare code. You know, we can't just trust zeros and ones. We don't work like that. We need something beautiful, and that's the role of crypto art.
Well, so again, we can explore that one more time, though, because it's a nice idea that the visual art is playing a role in this trustless world, and maybe giving people something to reground their and to find trust.
Right, exactly. Yeah. The artist comes along to give visual gravitas to something that has no visual lexicon. Bitcoin in its bare form is just ones and zeros, and crypto is waiting a decade for the crypto artist, the one who can apply aesthetics, who can apply something friendly, recognizable, beautiful, delightful, seductive, all the things that we enjoy about art, to this bare technology. This is something that coders don't really understand. You know, coders, they love code, they work with code, they don't work with aesthetics, and they just think, well, you know, here's my amazing code, you know, you should love it, you should, you know, respect my code. That's not how we work. We need branding. We need something that has a clear and consistent and trustworthy message. We use the cryptographic process to verify our transactions. That's a step beyond trusting an intermediary. But when it comes to actually trusting a form of money, we have to apply emotion to it. We have to emotionalize it. And to emotionalize it, we need art. Because art's utility is to provide emotional uplift. That is its own, if it has a utility, that's its own utility. So this mystic ingredient called emotion is what the artist brings.
And perhaps we just need to mature into that this space, this cryptographic money that we now have, has been the domain of cypherpunks and libertarians, and now it's bringing in the artists to allow us to mature in our understanding. And that would be nice.
Yeah, the thing about the artist is that when, you know, regardless of the artist's skill level, regardless of the artist's qualification, the process of creating art involves a lot of intuition. And the thing about intuition is that it can reach further than linear learning.
I think you had written something that may play into that. You had written a tweet that talent is constantly at odds with, quote, safety and security. Exceptional talent scares people who want a safe world, and the human race will only find its potential when adventurism and exceptionalism are embraced by all. No participation trophies. The future is for the exceptional. And because I think we've laid the groundwork, I really like this idea.
I wrote that?
You did.
Wow. It's pretty cool.
Sometimes Twitter inspires us. Well, I like the idea that if we're coming into this new world that I think may come a little sooner than you, but is going to be disruptive to many of our existing paradigms, that safety and security, or a lack thereof, or the perception that there's a lack of it, will bring talent forth.
Mm-hmm.
And so the future is going to be awash in talent.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, for sure. I
Cool.
think
And
that
artists among them. I guess that could extend to all kinds of domains.
a lot of great art has been made when there is a scarcity of resources, and scarcity of resources actually force us to value human life. It forces us to value what we create. It forces us to to take pride in our work, because we don't know when it all might end. You know, we don't know if the delivery will, the delivery with food and water and bare necessities will make it on time. You know, so when we become comfortable, it works in the opposite direction. We tend to not respect the abundance that we have, and I think that is a lot of what's happened to culture and art in the last 100 years. Is that when we become abundant, art almost tends to want to apologize for that abundance. It becomes it tends towards socialism. It tends towards apologizing for wealth. Art becomes like this sort of plaything of the rich to demonstrate, oh, look at me, look how understated I can be. You know, so it's sort of it's a race to understatement rather than something where that demonstrates the huge natural wealth that we all have, which is, you know, the genius within us all.
I guess I've spoken to a lot of artists so far in this show who are somewhat new to the arts or haven't spent as much time ruminating on the role of art throughout history. And some of them have just been inspired by Bitcoin. I feel like you have such a command of the history of art and your place in it that I think your words could really inspire other artists to think more conscientiously about what our role is, right? Bitcoin has inspired a lot of people, younger people especially, which is always hopeful. I'm 53, so I kind of I've had a different life, you know, usually twice as long as most of these other folks. So, and not that I'm Mr. Wise over here, but having been steeped in art history and being an artist, albeit fairly commercial, it's nice to talk to somebody who's got such a command and obviously just spent 2 years writing a book on this bizarre intersection of money and art.
Right.
We often equate the two with just the charlatans of the gallery world, not that the money itself being art.
Right. Yeah, I mean, being an authority on these things, it doesn't mean that I'm not, controversial, I guess, because I'm kind of worried about the book because, I could be stepping on a lot of people's toes, because the history of art is unquestioned. The history of the last 100 years of art is sort of, you can't, it is what it is in a way, and it's sort of, and to go back and sort of reinterpret it is kind of a dangerous thing. So I'm adding something new to art criticism, because it's not really I haven't seen anyone lay out postmodernism the way I have done in the book, and especially not compare it to Baroque. That's just insane. So yeah, there's a lot of things in the book which is difficult, which challenges the accepted notions of money, of art, and of history as well. But I wouldn't be able to talk about them if I didn't feel like I knew about them and had something different to say, I suppose. So, I'm happy to be put in any situation where I have to defend what I'm saying.
No, I really appreciate it. It's funny because the excerpts I've read from your website and stuff, it feels very much like you're talking to Bitcoiners.
Right.
And it's not controversial.
Okay.
The fact that reserve banking or fractional reserve banking is a problem,
Yeah.
Bitcoiners they're on board. Now it might be a little different for some kid trying to make an NFT on Tezos, or
Right.
an art historian, who knows more about the Baroque than we can imagine, trying to get their head around the next decade's, God knows what, ordinals or something.
Yeah, I mean, I did write.
Yeah, and
Sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I wrote with the Bitcoin crowd in mind. For Bitcoin people, it's the least controversial. I'm talking about people in the banknote industry, people in art history, all the product design, everybody else except Bitcoiners. Those are the people I'm worried about. But yeah, Bitcoin people, yeah, I'm sure they'll love it.
Yeah, it does feel like it, and I like too that you've been making a showing with your art. You were in Miami for Bitcoin 2023,
Yep.
and Bitcoin Magazine tapping your skills for the Bukele bill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, there is something avant-garde about being a Bitcoiner.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's not, I honestly, a lot of things in our environment which are marketed as avant-garde actually aren't. They are just sandboxes that the mainstream or the establishment puts out to capture a certain portion of people and then have them sort of onboarded onto their own scheme or deal or whatever they've got going on. Bitcoin, I believe, and there are many people have said that, Bitcoin is a Trojan horse and it's designed to get people onto central bank digital currencies. I personally don't believe that. I think Bitcoin is one of the few things in our world which is genuinely avant-garde. And I have my own crazy, dangerous theory as to who is behind Bitcoin. I'm not sure if I can say that on this podcast, but but I'm working on my own my own feeling, my own intuition. This is like my own intuition about Bitcoin, and I do believe that it is one of the few things in our world which is genuinely avant-garde. And if that's the case, then we all need to respect that, because we have to tread lightly. We have to be very careful about what we say, what our digital footprint is, because we are coming to a place where it becomes increasingly dangerous to be avant-garde. So it's not to be taken lightly. Bitcoin is genuinely dangerous, and it's great.
Yeah, I love it, because if we were to contrast that with the Baroque, there was nothing particularly dangerous about it. And that's where, getting back to that earlier idea, you seem to be at this lovely crossroads of this ethereal, enlightened, inspiring Baroque art form with this tip of the spear Bitcoin revolution. Let's do this, and let's get people moving forward through the tumult that awaits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to go back to craft, and that's the authentic place, because that's something that the level of craft being displayed right now by humanity is incredible. If you go on Instagram, there's just some amazing artists who are just have no gallery representation, but we're a brilliant species. Going back to the Baroque, that's the kind of same impulse they had. And where Baroque came from was something incredibly controversial, which was the church was basically failing, it was being criticized, and the Baroque emerged out of religious war. It came out of Protestants, the Reformation, Protestants versus Catholics. So that was just, it was a culture war. It was something incredibly contentious. But the way the Catholic Church responded was with this triumphant art. And I think that's the authentic way we need to go, because anything other than triumphant craft is almost activism. And activism is a bit of a trap, you know. It sort of gets you in this very disharmonious space, which is all about resistance. Whilst if you just fall back into what is essential, what is authentic about human potential, it is our ability to use our brain and 10 fingers to create something amazing. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so activism then would be the artistic expression of that would be a kind of propaganda, which I've been wrestling with quite a bit,
right,
in talking with folks.
Mm-hmm.
Are most Bitcoin artists propagandists?
You know, there's a few propaganda today in art is sort of like, it's not true propaganda. It's like an ape. It's like it's like a parody of propaganda, because there are a couple of artists out there who use that a kind of propaganda aesthetic. Say, like, you know, Soviet propaganda posters, or, you know, early 20th century American wartime posters, you know, stuff like that. We are aware of these tropes in design, and we kind of ape them, we parody them, because we understand implicitly that we've moved on. Having said that, though, there is mainstream culture is awash with propaganda, which takes an entirely different visual strategy. The way propaganda works today, true propaganda, is that it sort of weaponizes things like tolerance, and it weaponizes equality and stuff like that. That's where the true propaganda is emanating today. It doesn't have any of the nostalgia of say, like, Soviet propaganda, or, you know, like early 20th century propaganda, which was all about shoring up the nation state to create a sense of nationalism and encourage people to fight for their country. The propaganda that we have today is much more, it sort of weaponizes this sort of egalitarianism. Propaganda in art is more, I see it as more like a parody, you know, like there are people working in the space who would consider themselves activists, but I see them as parodies of activism. It's sort of, you know, true activism today is it's sort of weaponized a lot of these egalitarian ideas that have grown in the last 100 years. I'm talking
and
between the lines there, but hopefully you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, again, with the Bitcoin audience, we understand, and also I would say that this modern propaganda is bereft of beauty.
Right.
It's just a club on your head.
Yeah.
Right? Conform, whatever it is.
That's entirely. It's on purpose. There's no accident there. It's made so it's not meant to. It's meant to face away from any kind of tradition or culture or history, and the goal is to sort of reduce everything down to a technological present. You know what I mean? Rather than having a rich history, the goal is to sort of enforce this technological present.
Yeah, and interesting that the last bastion of symbols and meaning have found themselves on these little worthless pieces of paper that we call money.
Yeah. That's something I talk about in the book, where these, banknotes are this sort of outlier in culture and design. But maybe not such an outlier, because we have cryptocurrency and a lot of the same impulses when it comes to designing money we find in Bitcoin this respect of symbolism, this desire to find something resonant, to create gravitas around the idea of value. So again, I keep on coming back to this, but it's when it comes to money, when it comes to this thing that we need to be valued, it forces us to find resonant symbols. It sort of brings out the best in us in a way, so that money has this great motivator when it comes to art, and not just personal finance terms, in terms of actually wanting to find something of meaning, visual meaning, something resonant. And that's what's been so amazing for, in working with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. It's forced me to think of in ways of how can I present this in a way that everyone will trust and everyone will like, and how can I create something that is resonant, that is powerful, that communicates all this history and heritage that it doesn't have. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey in art and money.
Yeah, great. Well, look, I've really enjoyed our exploration of these ideas. I think we could sit and have more conversations.
Yeah,
you must be a ton of fun after a couple mezcals.
I don't drink, but after a couple of cups of tea, it's also kind of fun.
Yeah, well, just really lovely to explore this intersection with you, and it's allowed me to forgive your mention of the other chains.
Sorry, not sorry.
No, I know you're not. And look, as there shouldn't be restrictions on artistic exploration, and I think it's you're well with, as we established early on, the artist has their little. They get that excuse.
Right. Yeah, the get out jail free card. I always say hodl and hedge. So hodl what you love, but also hedge against it. So that's my mantra in life and in crypto.
No, very nice. And I look forward to spending more time with you in person. I think that we could really poke around on the future. I think it'd be really fun to see how it unfolds. I think we're very much in alignment or hopeful that the artists will ground us and give us strength as things fall apart. Are you just as a last fun question, if we often talk about Bitcoin as a cathedral, and you've evoked the cathedral a few times today, where do you picture us in the process of the cathedral building, and what is your role?
I am offering murals, plans to build murals. At the same time, the cathedral building process is going to have its first big road bump. So whilst I'm offering my murals, I'm also preparing for crisis.
Nice. So there's a roof. Nice.
So long as the mural plans are out there in the form of books, and enough books are laying around in the future, then I will have made my mark, and perhaps someone will pick one of them up and make a mural from my plans that I've laid out.
Yeah, nice. I would hope that are there plans for you to teach your skill sets to people in the future?
I would love to teach, perhaps not how to teach printing money, but absolutely, I think I see these books as like a precursor to something like that, because I think I have a perspective which is hard to find in the realm of art, and there aren't many crypto artists who are sort of writing books as well, and really kind of formulating their kind of philosophy of design or a philosophy of art that's kind of different. And there certainly isn't someone who's been in the banknote industry doing that. So yeah, I think I have something to offer there. And this is a spoiler alert. It's going to be the first in a series. So I hope to release the next books that go a lot deeper into the themes that I'm talking about, because I did find that there was much more to talk about in these themes.
Terrific. Yeah, good. And that's kind of how I felt about this whole conversation, that there's so much more to keep exploring. And so let's do that. We'll have you back on the next one, or we'll have these conversations in person.
That'll be awesome. Yeah. Sweet.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for your time, man.
Thank you. It's been awesome.